to get through this.
Easy for listening. I was able to do it.
Easy for dancing.
I'm not a great lover of cats. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Not me. That's my fear.
You're a disgrace, you are.
Hello and welcome to One-on-One Shadowboxing. Today my fellow shadowboxer is Ben Wyatt, who is the Shadow Treasurer in the West Australian government. And some other portfolios you got, Ben.
I have a few, Tibor, yes. I have Aboriginal Affairs, Native Title, Pilbara, Kimberley and Cost of Living. So a range.
Which portfolio you are really, close to? Which one is your favourite?
I'm really loving, more than I thought I would, I might add, I'm really loving Treasury. I got Treasury, I was elected in 2006, and so I spent first nearly just over 2 years in politics on the government backbench with Alan Carpenter as Premier. And then when the Labor government lost in 2008, I was given Treasury. So I was given a significant promotion to take on a heavy portfolio.
And you like it?
I do. People ask me about that. Well, the reason I like it is that it is so broad and it really gives you the jurisdiction to stick your nose into almost anything and any part of government spending. So
does this give you more responsibility as well?
It does give you more responsibility, but you get a very good understanding broadly of how government operates. On the one side, how it raises its revenue.
Very few people understand these days how government operates.
I wouldn't say have a thorough understanding, but certainly you get a good understanding of how the revenue raised and how decisions are made around expenditure, but in particular, that complicated relationship between the state and federal government, because ultimately the federal government funds so much of what it is state government does that you really need to have a good understanding of that relationship. And now,
so what's the relationship between state and federal? Is it a happy relationship or a love and hate relationship?
A creative tension, often goes through often can be in love, and often can be very, very hostile to each other. And I think you saw, in fact, the Barnett government, there was a lot of love between Colin Barnett and Kevin Rudd early on in the Rudd Prime Ministership, and that's become more hostile over time, which is not unusual. State and federal governments historically around the country have a hostile relationship, ultimately because states are so dependent for such a significant part of their revenue on federal government now.
So what's the percentage we got as a state funding from federal and how much you are able to raise locally?
Yeah, great question. Really now states have three taxes that they can really implement: payroll, stamp duty and land tax. That's your three. In WA we're very lucky. We also have a significant mining royalty revenue, which most states don't have. So we really have...
But mining stays here or going split with this federal government?
Well, that's right. Well, we effectively distribute that. Well, we don't. The Commonwealth Grants Commission, when it looks at allocating GST, it looks at the average revenue raising capability of all the states, and it says to WA, well, at the moment anyway, because of your higher than average mining royalties, we're going to distribute that to the other states. And the theory behind it is called fiscal equalisation, and that is the Commonwealth Grants Commission operates on the assumption that every state government should be able to provide to their citizens about the same standard of living. And that's the theory. Now, of course, what we've seen over the last, governments have been complaining about this ever since the GST deal was struck, that more and more GST is being taken off Western Australia and sent to Canberra, therefore to the other states.
Redistribute that wealth.
Which is really the redistribution of the mining royalties that we've been getting. Yes. So, but it's important to note, and this is something that Mr Barnett doesn't point out, is that GST, yes, it has declined, but overall our revenue has increased strongly under the Barnett government. It's increased by 30%. So we actually
let me understand that the percentage of GST declined, what we collected, but the overall revenue from that collection went up.
Overall revenue, so payroll tax, royalties, they've surged considerably over the last 4 years.
So the incoming money is grown?
Is offsetting that loss.
Offsetting the loss.
Yes, that's right.
But that doesn't make us really super rich, does it?
No, not at all. But certainly, if you think about it, took over 100 years of economic development to get to 2008. And then in the last 5 years, we've had another 30% increase. So there has still been strong revenue growth in Western Australia. It's how you prioritise what you spend that money on, is the difference between governments.
How this sharing of the revenue reflects for the sharing of the debt? So if a state makes huge debt, is it a gain from the revenue, is a share to equalize the debt? So how does it work? Is it works?
No, unfortunately not.
Tell us, please.
We have strong revenue growth, but we've also had very strong spending growth over the last 5 years. Spending growth averaged 7.5% under the former Labor government. It's averaged 10% under the Barnett government. Now, ultimately, even though you've had strong revenue growth at 30%, you've had expense growth at 40%. So ultimately, that's been funded by debt. That's right.
Yes.
So ultimately, you spend more than you earn. Eventually, the debt will get to a precarious position.
So you have to find the money from somewhere.
That's right. So
tell us, how does it work if you got a bill which is $2,000 and you got only $1,000 revenue? You have to find $1,000 to pay that bill.
Well,
Yes.
WA actually, one of the biggest lenders to WA historically has been the Japanese government. The
Yes.
Japanese buy a lot of our bonds, but our bonds are considered what they call a sub-sovereign bond, so AAA rated, very strongly rated. So governments around the world are happy to purchase our bonds because they're safe.
So we're issuing the bonds, we're generating money, and that's should be the balance between the real spending and the deficit between the revenue and the real spending.
Yeah, that's right. And so you've had...
so apart from Japanese?
Well, I think there'll be... I have to go back and have a look, but I think there's some sold in the United States. There's some sold all around. All around. It's sold.
Any of our citizens?
Interestingly, yes, because we are now buyers of the Queensland bonds. Our state buys Queensland government bonds, for example. So I think if you went and had a look, chances are you'd have other states buying Western Australian bonds.
Why are we buying Queensland bonds? You know, they got lots of debts and things. I mean,
because they have a lower credit rating now, because they lost their AAA, they have to pay higher interest rates. So you're gaining more.
To buy that one.
Yeah, that's right. Lending to Queensland, you're getting a higher rate of return than, say, lending to the Commonwealth government. So, yes, our WA's credit rating is still AAA. It's on a negative watch. The credit rating agencies are worried about our debt levels and the fact that we are very reliant on a very narrow revenue base, royalties, payroll. But it is still a safe investment.
So what is the debt? Where are we now?
Well, when Colin Barnett became Premier, the net debt position was, from memory, $3.5 billion. Now, this financial year, it's due to get to about $18.5 billion. And by the end of the forward estimates, expected to get to close to $25 billion. So it is at a level that's not sustainable, absolutely not sustainable.
So where this $25 billion or 20 or whatever it is, now it's went. So where we invested that? So why we needed this extra spending?
Well, it goes into, Colin Barnett has made decisions around Elizabeth Quay. There's a better part of $500 million being spent on Elizabeth Quay. He'll be shortly spending in excess of $1 billion on a new stadium. Governments spend on all sorts of different things. A lot of the debt will be borrowed in what we call our trading enterprises. So your water corporation, Western Power, they borrow significant amounts of money to
paying the
build.
bills.
Yeah, that's right. So Western Power borrow money to put in new poles and wires, and Water Corp borrow money to put in new water pipes, desalination plants. All these things that cost money is generally where the state debt goes. But you've also seen significant debt increase in the general government sector. So now just the general operating expenses of government.
So the bureaucracy takes a big,
the
fair share of that.
Well, we're still while we're running operating surpluses. Theoretically, then we're still making enough money to pay the salaries of our public servants. But the general government sector also includes things like hospital investment, building schools, that sort of spending as well, and a lot of that is borrowed money. How
a government, even if it's just a state government, can go into a financial year without having a budget?
Very good question. I was a bit curious about that myself. When the election was held in March and the government said, well, we're going to delay the budget till August, my initial thought was, well, how are they going to get from July 1 until the budget? So the government had to bring on what was really a piece of legislation that authorised government spending,
without
through
having a budget.
to, yeah, that's right. The Parliament authorised that spending, and it.
So it's bipartisan authorisation?
Yeah, the opposition now, we don't vote against budgets or spending legislation. The government has the numbers in any event, so if we wanted to, we couldn't have stopped that. So that way the government is accountable for the way it spends public money. So that will effectively become the first quarter of the financial year, and the budget will then take all that in as well. So the budget will be proper financial year budget, but we've had to give some special authorisation to get past 30 June.
So is this responsible way from the government to act?
No, it's not. They should have, and the Under-Treasurer Tim Marnie made the point in Parliamentary Committee that the budget could have come down before the end of the financial year. We now know that. At the time, we were advised by the Premier and the Treasurer saying, well, we have to defer because we don't have the time to prepare the budget.
Well,
we
that's
now know,
bullshit.
we now know that's wrong. Tibor, you said it perfectly. That's now, we now know it's wrong, and the Under-Treasurer Tim Marnie confirmed that.
But it's common sense, Ben. I mean,
well,
you as the opposition, you have to jump up and down and
absolutely,
you know.
and I did that on ABC this morning. I mean, it's you
a bit late for that, but yeah, that's.
I know. Well, that's right. Well, it's very rare you get these sort of admissions from bureaucrats such as Tim Marnie, but he made the point we could have brought the budget down in time, and we should have brought it down in time. That would have been proper accountable government.
And if it's happening with a company, you know, the CEO is going to be kicked off.
That's right. And it was, I mean, this has been the thing since Mr. Barnett was re-elected. His view has been, well, I can do what I like. And he
because
has the
we
numbers.
give them the license.
Yeah, that's right.
So he's got the license. And thank you very much. Now I do whatever I like.
That's right.
However, this one, he done it before the election.
Yeah, he never mentioned this before the election. No, that's right. No, he never said he would delay the budget before the election. That was a post-election announcement. Yeah.
On that note, we have to go and have a little break. But please stay with us, because after the break, we're coming back with more on one-on-one shadow boxing with Ben Wyatt.